What's up, everybody? Hobby with Cage, episode 223. 5 minutes of hobby talk today. Brought to you by Bleecker Trading and Arena Club. What are we going to talk about today? I think we beat the hell out of the Fanatics Fest. I'm sure there'll be plenty of content coming out about that. We did plenty of episodes about it. And, kid loved it. I was at graduation today, sixth grade graduation. And a couple of the dads I overheard talking about it. It was the best weekend. You got to go next year. It's so good. Which is, I mentioned yesterday, I've never heard anybody say that about the national, just general speaking. These are, like softball dads and, that may or may not own a card or two. Um, and the funny thing about that is I'll pivot to the other way of talking about it, right? So somebody made a great analogy to me today about the difference between, Fanatics Fest and the national. And I mean, I should just find it, so that I'm not, misparaphrasing. But basically, the gist of it was that, you know, the national is for old people, for lack of a better way of saying it. I mean, that was kind of the way that they said it, right? That national was it's I'm not gonna be able to find it. I have a lot of messages today. I apologize. I should have had it at the ready. But basically, they're saying it's not really, they're not really similar anymore. And people who are going to Fanatics Fest, yeah, the card show is part of it. The card show is, it's a big deal, but it's not. That's not what people are going there for. It's part of it, sure. Somebody sent me a cool um, somebody sent me a cool idea, basically saying that their thought was from my episode, tough time getting a table at the National. One thing that they have that would free up space and allow many more tables with dealers selling cards, get rid of the Breakers Pavilion. I mean, that Breakers Pavilion was kind of the one way they got some new blood in. It was sort of cheating, right? And if you remember, they set up this area for the Breakers, but you couldn't sell cards there. That was kind of like that was the give and the take, the push and the pull, right? You were able to kind of skip the line if you were a breaker and get space there, but you had to be breaking. That was part of the Breakers Pavilion. It wasn't you were setting up a table with cards and competing with the other people who were setting up tables to sell their cards. Another thing, there was like very little vintage. I mean, there was some vintage, with very little vintage at the at the show. I mean, it happens. I'm not, that's the Fanatics Fest is not really about vintage. You know, it, there'll be plenty more vintage at the National if that's where your head is at, if that's where you're trying to collect. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm still excited about the National. But a lot of people ask me, am I still going to go? Well, yeah, I'll be there. 100% be there. And I'm sure it's going to set records. I'm sure it's going to, set a record for attendance. Um, I like that PSA is grading on site. I mentioned in my news today the whole $600 is $599 for like a crossover look. Um, I guess that's I'm sure there are people who are going to use it, right? Because it gives you the ability to know whether or not it's going to cross over for a flat rate, and then they charge you for the actual grading and you name it. It's the National; they can do whatever they want. You know what I mean? It's a service they're able to provide because the card's being graded right there. And I guess instead of handing your card over and coming back and getting it the next day and being told shit, it didn't grade, it didn't cross over, you kind of get to know immediately. All right, it's going to cross. Here's how much it's going to cost for you to cross it over. I mean, I can understand certain cards, people wanting to do that. So well, I guess we'll see. Um, yeah. So I mean, Nationals a couple weeks away. The only other thing that I'll throw out there for you is this. Be careful, Jaden Daniel sale. We've talked about this. Be careful with SGA. I mean, people are going to be flooding the market with the SGA stuff. I mean, I would have told you to sell his stuff already. this is a great season. He's done something that doesn't really happen, but it's been known pretty much that this is what was going to happen. It's been kind of baked into a lot of his prices that he was going to win the MVP and that he was going to win the championship. We've seen recently with parity in the league, people win championships and it not really cause a big uptick in their prices. I mean, Tatum's stuff didn't really go up that much. Um, when they won the title last year, you'd like to think that, SGA, Tatum, that kind of, like, I guess, similar young guys, the alphas on their team, young teams. Everybody thought after Boston won, they'd come back and win it again this year. And that didn't happen. Um, you know, SGA, that's a young nucleus. That's a young team. They got a lot of picks. They can keep it together. It could be some good stuff. But with the parity in the league, he may not ever go back there. So you got that. You got the Jaden Daniels, $500,000 sale. That does not mean that your base PSA 10 Jaden Daniels all of a sudden, gets a bump up. That's not the way this stuff works. The people who are buying $500,000 Jaden Daniels won't even look at that stuff. It's just one sale. It's one kind of, outlier. That's it. I would be telling you to sell your SGA. Hell, I'd be telling you could probably sell your Jaden Daniels soon. People are going to be starting to look for all the quarterbacks. This is what happens. And a sneaky one. I used to give plays. I used to give picks. Daniel Jones. Not for the long term. Not for anything crazy. But I have a feeling. I watched a lot of Colts games because I had Jonathan Taylor last year. Anthony Richardson, not so great, man. Can't stay healthy. Doesn't look like somebody who can actually throw the ball. Looks like an athlete. Looks sort of like a larger, taller version of Justin Fields, who can make some plays with his legs, but not really with his arms. I bet you Daniel Jones wins the starting job in Indianapolis, and you see a spike in his cards. Not financial advice or anything like that. We don't like to give plays, but that's a sneaky one. You could probably buy his stuff pretty cheap because he didn't exactly have success with the Giants, but who has since Eli? Maybe that's a sneaky quarterback play, comes out of nowhere, sort of like Darnold, who was dead and buried in New York and all of a sudden had a nice season, with some weapons out in Minnesota. And he has some weapons. It's not the worst team in the world. And there's 5 minutes, 7.5 of hobby thoughts brought to you by Arena Club and Blinkers Trading. See you tomorrow, guys.